All right, so we finished up our line art in the last video, and we set it up in Photoshop as a smart object. Here it is, as a smart object. And we turned it gray and locked it. This is now our clean vector line art. And then underneath, we changed the background color to be blank white. So we have a blank white layer underneath everything. And then we built this layer that we're making our cheese layer, our yellow layer. I called it flatting. Now, a really quick way to do this is to make a duplicate of your line art, put it on top, and then rasterize it. Right-click and rasterize it. And then you're able to use a very early digital imaging tool, which is called the paint bucket tool. You'll find it under the gradient, and it's underneath the eraser, just the paint bucket. And then for flatting, for kind of crazy colors, you can go to swatches in your color options, and you can go to the pastels. And these are kind of the old retro color mixes for old comic books up through the 80s. That's because they were printed on newsprint and you could only have very limited colors. So these are all very distinct from each other, and I can pick one. Notice how I'm using the paint bucket, and as soon as I go over the swatch, that paint bucket changes to what's called an eyedropper tool. So when I click on this pink, for instance, now it puts that pink into my foreground color. And then I can click on it. And because that, like a coloring book, is completely filled, like the line art is completely encased, that's good. Now for flatting to work, I want to choose another color for the things next to it. Right? So I'm just going to make these all pretty crazy. Make them all distinct. Now, that hoof is not touching this hoof, so I can use the same color there, there, and there, right? And now all the hooves will be the same color. Let's use the red here. Let's use it for the rainbow tail. So RGBiv, red, green, blue, indigo, violet. And then the stars, let's just go with the yellow. I haven't used the pure yellow yet. And then with the bones, let's see, let's do a green. For the top of the skull, let's do a different green for the bottom skull. Let's do this blue. Nope, let's do this one for the spine, spinal column. Let's do the bright red for the internal organs. Let's do, on and on. So I'm just choosing colors. Now notice all of these shapes have been fully contained shapes. So what do I mean by that? They've all, everything that in my line art has not had any openings. But my flames have openings, right? So let me do my horn. I'll do it as yellow, right? And then I'll do my teeth as yellow as well. Anything you want to have color, you want to do it this way. But if I want my flames to be nice and orange, I click on it, and because it's open, that's going to fill up the whole background. So that's no good. So this is as much as I can do at this stage, though I can still fill in all of this, right? And this could be a real pain to click each of these, but it's because they're all contained. Now I'm doing it on a duplicate of my black line art. That's important. And I rasterize that duplicate. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to add pixels. But my next step is I don't want my color mixed in with my line art. So my next step is I'm going to get rid of my black line art. But I'll show you what I can do first. This is the flatting. I'm also going to fill in the eye socket, right? Which almost got everything, not quite everything. And if I'm really, really picky, you'll see how there's a little gap in here, right? So I can also hold down Option and just steal that color and then drop it there. But I'm okay with the other gaps, like the gaps for the nostril. And then these little shapes here, I'm just going to fill them in. So now, how can I color the flames in that orange color that I want? This one. I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool, just like we did when we were doing digital inking. I'm going to use it with the settings of being a hard-edged brush. So I want its hardness to be 100%. I want it to be the general brush I like to use, just like I do for inking, the hard round pressure size. And then I'm going to close that gap. I'm going to close it there. I'm going to close it there. But I'm doing it with a color. And then I'm going to close the gaps here. But that's going to be with a different color. I'm going to close the gaps here. And here. And here. And here. So this is why kind of open shapes are a bit of a pain, but they're often necessary. And here. That might be all. So that now, up here. And here. Okay, so now when I use the paint bucket and I drop it in, it's all going to be contained. And because I use that same color to fill my gaps, that color shape will be contained. Now what about this inner shape? I want to find another color. Let's use the light blue, because I don't think I'm using that anywhere else. And I'm going to paint with that and fill these gaps. And these are big gaps, so I'm going to do it there and there. And now I'm going to use that color with the paint bucket, and I'm going to fill it in like that and like that. Those are all the places where I want color for my design. Those are what are called flatting colors. And I think it looks a little weird here, so I'm going to use my paintbrush. I'm going to extend that coloring shape to that. Okay, now what do I do? Now I need to get rid of the black from this layer. So that's easily done. Black is very different than these pastel colors. So I'm going to use my magic wand. And I'm going to uncheck contiguous. I'm going to leave its tolerance at 32, and I'm going to click on the black. Right? And then I'm simply going to delete it all. And you'll notice it's not going to delete it all because I have it showing underneath. So I hit delete, but then when I turn off the smart object underneath and I hit deselect, Command D, you'll see now I only have flatting colors. They are all floating on their own. So that is what flatting colors look like. This is what they look like with black on top of them. Sometimes this can set you up for your best coloring. So I'm going to save my work here, Command S, but I'm also going to save just a JPEG of my line art here, because this is now my vector line art. You see how the smart object is showing? So I'm going to save that as a JPEG. So save a copy. Why a JPEG? Actually, I can save it as a PNG. Why not? So I'll turn the background off and then say File, Save a Copy, PNG, and this is going to be my black line art. So this is not my coloring yet, but that's because you have to save an online file out of Photoshop, right? It has to be raster. And then before I go go too much further on coloring, I'm going to show you some examples. So I go to assignment 5, and as I scroll down, you'll see kind of the little primer coloring sheet. We're on in between the vector line art and the flat local color. We're at a step that's a professional step called flatting that you can choose to skip if you know what kind of colors you want. But we'll see examples of that with this link, the exhaustive explanation of digital coloring. But while you're in there, you might as well post your black line art. So I posted my concept sketch. That's the first requirement. I also have my inspirations. And notice how that's just flat color. How that's just flat color. How this is mostly flat color, right? So I'm going to edit this. And I'm going to add my next requirement, which is the black vector line art, which might not look too different than the line art that you did in Photoshop if you did it that way. But it's a vector, so it's infinitely scalable. It will always be clean at any resolution. And you could save it as a JPEG, that's fine. But I'm going to save it as a PNG with no background. And I saved it to the desktop. Here it is. I mark it orange. It's my online file format. I'm going to mark my coloring as I go. My PSD is green. That's my working file format. And then I drag and drop this in. And I'm going to shrink it down. And you just want this spot illustration to get better and better. So hopefully your vector line art is an improvement on your sketch. Okay. Now let's look at digital coloring. So digital coloring has a definition. It's coloring that's behind real or implied line art. So in all digital coloring, you should be able to see the lines. They're not always black, but they're always there. If you can see lines, it is digital coloring. If you don't see lines, then it's digital painting, because it was painted just right on top of a sketch. So let's look. And we're very used to seeing this, especially in things like animation, right? Where you have line art, and then the line art gets cleaned up, inked, and then it gets filled in with flat color, and then we can get modifications of the flat color. So this artist, Bryce Koo out of Pasadena, California, they like to finish off in what's called cell shading or duotone hard edge. In animation, it's called cell shading. And so you'll see the flat colors, but then you'll see how those flat colors change to highlights and shadow tones in that step. And that's her finish. And here is a little self-portrait. So you see the flat color, but then it also has a shadow tone to it. So we'll learn how to do that too. This is the more kind of exhaustive breakdown of what you can do with coloring. So once you have your vector line art, we're going to fill it with your local colors, the colors you want the things to be. And then we can play with adding highlights and shadows and variations to them. And then eventually we can even add little things like sparkles and things that go above the line art. The metaphor I like to use for this is a sandwich, a digital coloring sandwich. You need bread on top. That's your black line art. That's black bread. You need a white clean layer underneath. That's your blank white layer. That's the white bread. And you need at least one layer of color in between. That would be like your flat colors. So these are the colors that were used in early color printing. This was all of them. This was all you could mix easily with 150 pixels per inch. Not even pixels, but onto newsprint for early printing on cheap papers. So all comic books before 1990 were made with only these colors. So they're good flatting colors to use. You know, they're just a mixture of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But since then, since the 90s, using kind of better papers, better printing techniques, we're able to match thousands of colors. So there's all kinds of ways we can stylize it. Within the lines, outside of the lines. but it all starts with flat color. So that's the cheese on the simple sandwich.